An American pilot is still alive after surviving a horrific crash in a Quebec forest. Matt Lehtinen was able to capture footage of his search and rescue, and he joins us now from our Montreal studio. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you.
How far into the flight, Matt, did you notice trouble?
It's about 40 minutes into the flight. I had been at cruise flight for about 20 minutes when I noticed my engine temperatures were not right. So I immediately looked at what my options were for the clearest airport, nearest airport, which was Sept-Îles, and I quickly diverted there.
Okay, so how far was the nearest airport at the time?
At the time, it was about 65 nautical miles away. I still had about 25 minutes of flight time to get there, and I lost my engine about 5 minutes later.
Okay, so you realized you were losing your engine or you lost your engine, then what?
Well, the first thing I did is I looked for a place to put it down. I was flying a Cirrus SR-22, so it had a CAPS parachute system on board. I was most concerned about a water body that was right ahead of me, and I had a tailwind behind me, so I did a 180-degree turn. I made sure I lost enough altitude so that when I pulled the parachute, the wind wouldn't blow me into the reservoir. And when I was about 2,000 feet above the ground, I pulled the chute. Everything went as I was trained and as I expected. Except for as I was descending into the tree lines, a large, I think it was a balsam tree, exploded through the bottom of the plane and came about inches from cutting my leg open.
Yeah, that's not everything going as planned, I think.
No, not quite.
Okay, so let me ask you, and just to clarify to the viewers, the parachute system is for the plane itself. It wasn't like you were wearing a parachute and got separated from the plane.
Correct. I think initial reports were that I was skydiving around Sept-Îles. That was not the case. The airplane itself has a ballistic parachute system, and Cirrus has had those systems on those airplanes since they began manufacturing them about 20 years ago.
Okay, so were you calm when all of this happened, or had the adrenaline kicked in? How were you feeling?
Certainly adrenaline kicks in, heart was pounding, but I was able to stay focused on what I had to do. I didn't start thinking about other things like my family, getting messages out until I was on the ground and away from the airplane. So from the moment I lost my engine until I was on the ground, it was pure focus on what do I have to do next to maximize the success of this crash.
Okay, so what did you do? Because I know you had to get the attention of people to get a rescue going.
Yeah, first thing I did is I was prepared. I had a GPS device with satellite messaging capabilities, so I enabled the SOS features of that. It took me a long time to find a clearing in this thick forest on a hillside where I could transmit and receive messages. I was sending my coordinates. I eventually got confirmation that they had my coordinates. But even with a search aircraft overhead with my coordinates, they were still not locating me. So I went back to the plane, got out my survival kit, and began to start a fire. And I burned a lot of wet moss so that I could make smoke signals for the rescue aircraft.
And was that something you learned as part of your training to be a pilot, or are you an outdoors person and knew what to do?
Well, I grew up in northern Minnesota. I wouldn't call myself an outdoors person, but I certainly had thought through, what I would need if I had to pull the parachute and go down over a remote area. I was pretty well prepared, but I wasn't 100% prepared. So, some things that I learned from this was I did not have enough water. I wasn't dressed for the environment. The insects were terrible. The weather was warm. I was dehydrated. So I would have done a lot of things different, and I'm just very fortunate that the rescue went basically perfect to get me out of there in a relatively short amount of time.
Why did you decide to record all of this?
Once the initial shock was over and I had my GPS with the initial messages out, I just felt very compelled to begin recording. I was just feeling like, this is going to be an experience that others can learn from. After the fact, I wasn't thinking about this at the time, but I was very grateful to have that footage so that I could, in a creative way, try to highlight the unbelievable efforts of everyone that worked to rescue me. The incredible people of the Armed Services of Canada that scaled out of a helicopter to pull me out of the woods. So it's awe-inspiring when it happened to me, and to have that footage afterward, I was grateful I could hopefully put something together to honor their efforts.
Well, Matt Lehtinen, glad you survived. Glad you're doing well, and thank you very much for joining us today.
Yep, thank you very much.